Howdy, folks. This is John Adamson with Seeking Light. And today is an absolutely lovely Wednesday, November 10th, 2021. Tomorrow is one of my children's birthdays. Looking forward to that. Anyway, some interesting things in the news and something that just dawned on me as I was reading the Biden mandate, the OSHA ETS that's to go into effect if the stays on the execution of this do not continue. First of all, let's talk about Facebook. So you may know that Facebook has basically been renamed according to all of their companies underneath their umbrella. They are now called Meta. And Meta is over all of their brands. And they've bought up a number of other companies. And so now the giant company above Facebook is Meta. And one of the things that they've developed or in the process of developing is something called the Metaverse. By the way, there's a pretty long presentation. It's over an hour long. It's available on YouTube of Mark Zuckerberg explaining the Metaverse and how it would function and whatnot. And I just wanted to bring a biblical perspective to this whole idea with the first a little bit of the story. I remember when I was a young adult, still unmarried. I might have been engaged or dating at the time, and computer games at that point weren't all immersive as they are now, but they were pretty immersive and it did have pretty decent graphics. But I was at the home of my parents. My parents were both big computer geeks at the time, and my dad was playing a game and I was playing on another computer with him. And actually, I think I know when this was. I was living at that house briefly in between jobs, getting ready to travel. And so I was living at my parents' house briefly. Anyway, I was playing this game with my dad, really into it. You have this avatar on the screen, this character you developed, and a friend of mine called. A guy who was a pretty good friend. We did a lot of hanging out. And I was so into the game, I know I came across as rude. Like I didn't engage him in the conversation, and I could tell after a minute or two, he could tell I was not into the conversation. He's like, "All right, well, I'll talk to you later." Like he cut the conversation short, and I only realized after the fact that, I possibly damaged that relationship by showing him not a lot of interest. I was more concerned about the avatar and my character in this game world than I cared about my person in the real world. So what does the metaverse do? It allows you to be fully immersed in a work environment, in your social life, etc., in basically a virtual reality world. You wear virtual reality glasses and everything's projected. And anyway, it's an interesting concept. It's not fully realized yet, but it got me thinking a little bit about Christian theology and the difference between Christian theology and other types of theology. One aspect of Christian theology that's somewhat unique amongst world religions is the fact that a Christian believes that we are fully formed as body and soul. And some would say, you've also got this other characteristic, tripartite personhood where you've got spirit, soul, and body. It doesn't really matter for this discussion, but we're created as complete beings. And the mind should be engaging with the body and vice versa. What will happen, and this will happen, and it does happen even now with virtual reality gaming, where you so immerse yourself into that world that you escape your mental connection with your body, with the body that God gave you. And I think that has some pretty significant and potentially damaging ethical and spiritual concerns as a Christian. And I like gaming. I have a little game I play on my phone, but I'm not immersed in it. I'm very aware of what's going on around me. But this is where your whole the senses you have, are just thoroughly engaged in that world. So the metaverse, it's coming out. What's interesting, if you look at the YouTube video from Mark Zuckerberg about the metaverse, again, it's a little over an hour long. It used to have the ability to thumb up, thumb down it in comments. And there was a lot of comments, and a lot of them were anti-metaverse. Well, now that ability has been removed. You can no longer comment on it, and you don't see the thumbs ups, the thumbs down, which tells me that the vast majority of them were probably negative. And so they're trying to do damage control by controlling for allowing no comments. Yahoo News did the same thing a while back, actually before the last presidential campaign. They stopped allowing people to comment on the articles they were posting because the vast majority of them were negative, because Yahoo is very liberal. And so anyway, keep an eye on the metaverse, and comment below, if you would, what are your thoughts on basically being totally immersed, not just for gaming, but for all aspects of life? Because one of Mark Zuckerberg's visions for this is to incorporate it into your work environment, where you are working remotely, but actually virtually in your office with your coworkers. So you could literally be in a virtual reality world all day long. What do you think about that? Does it have is it concerning to you? I'd love to hear about that. Also, Pete Buttigieg, who is our transportation secretary. His qualification was that he ran for the last presidential campaign. He was mayor of a relatively small city in Indiana. That was his qualification to run. And then he lost, and Joe Biden decided to make him transportation secretary, even though he demonstrates he really doesn't understand transportation. And he's not really taking his job very seriously. But one of the things he's come up with recently is the idea of making roads less racist. And this is just very interesting. So first of all, a road is a road. It's an inanimate object. It is not racist. Now, could the people who have built the roads in the past been racist? Well, yes, they could. But how do roads get built, or what determines the building of a road? Well, generally to get from point A to B, right? So if you have two cities or fairly large centers of population, it would be good to be able to connect them. That causes the development of a road. You have businesses that are popping up. Roads might develop to get people to those businesses or to those domiciles where they live. Roads aren't racist, and the people that develop these roads aren't thinking, like he uses the example that some overpasses were made on certain roads to prevent large buses by which minority groups might travel to pass. So they're blocking transportation of minority groups. First of all, that's very racist to say that only minority groups use buses. What are you getting at, Pete? That's a very racist comment by you. So anyway, roads are racist. So his job, as he sees it, is to re-envision the American motorways to be more inclusive and less racist. What a complete and utter moron. You want to talk about roads being built to nowhere? Or you ever been in a freaky house where they have stairs built to nothing? I have a feeling that's going to end up being what this leads to, is you're going to be building roads that are so-called not racist, but don't serve the significant purpose of what it means to have a road. In other words, to have transportation that's adequate from point A to point B. So anyway, another story. But let's get to the ETS, the COVID vaccination ETS. And I'm going to skip some questions because, frankly, they're boring and redundant. But this, I think, is one of the death knells for this whole ETS Biden mandate. This is question 4D under OSHA's frequently asked questions related to the ETS. Are the vaccination records and roster considered medical records? Are they confidential, or can they be shared with the employees? So here's their answer. The records and roster required by the ETS are considered to be employee medical records and must be maintained as such records in accordance with 29 CFR 1910.1020 and must not be disclosed except as required or authorized by this ETS or other federal law, including the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. OSHA considers vaccination records required by paragraph E of the ETS to be employee medical records concerning the health status of an employee and is requiring this personally identifiable medical information to be maintained in a confidential manner. The vaccination records and rosters must be treated as employee medical records under 29 CFR 1910.1020 without regard to whether the records satisfy the definition of the employee medical record. Under paragraph 1 or I1 of the ETS, the employer must make available for examination and copying the individual COVID-19 vaccine documentation for a particular employee to that employee and to anyone having written authorized consent of that employee. In addition, paragraph 1/2 or whatever of the ETS provides that by the end of the next business day after a request by an employee or an employee representative, the employer must make available to the requestor the aggregate number of fully vaccinated employees at a workplace along with total number of employees at that workplace. Ooh, I hadn't seen that. Okay, so what does this mean? This means that if your employer puts upon you an externally visible sign that you're not vaccinated, and that distinguishes you from the rest of the employees, you are being discriminated upon, against, and that is an outward sign of a disclosure of your medical records to other people without your consent. Think about that. Logically. Applying this law logically. They're saying that my vaccination status as an unvaccinated individual is a protected class. And I should have it kept confidential. So if my employer then mandates me to wear something externally, like some organizations have wanted to put their vaccinated staff, I heard one place they had to, they had the vaccinated staff, they got a little sticker on their badge that said, I am fully vaccinated or something like that, whereas the other ones couldn't have that. That is a form of discrimination for one thing. And secondly, it is a disclosure of protected health information. This is an end to fighting this. But notice what this said in the last paragraph. I'm going to read this again. The employer must make available for examination and copying the individual COVID-19 vaccination documentation for a particular employee to that employee and to anyone having written authorized consent of that employee. So if you don't give consent for other employees to know your vaccination status, they should not be able to tell it. But going on, in addition, the ETS provides that by the end of the next business day, after a request by an employee or an employee representative, the employer must make available to the requester the aggregate number of fully vaccinated employees at a workplace along with the total number of employees at that workplace. In other words, you have a right as an employee to find out comparatively how many vaccinated to how many total employees. So you can get a sense of how many people like you are resisting. I'm going to take advantage of this. I think this is really important because it gives you an idea of your strength in numbers, which I think is very helpful. But I'm going to press. I like this. This is an awesome thing that they are viewing these vaccination records as protected health information, and therefore, only under our disclosure can they have a right to disclose it. John Adamson with Seeking Light. Take care. God bless.